Good afternoon, everyone. I cordially welcome you all for the 10th lecture of the short course on cultural linkage towards Asian ideology. Today we are focusing on gender perspectives in community development in Asia, the role of Asian women. The program for today is such that the lecture is scheduled to be for 45 minutes with a short break of 5 minutes followed by a question and answer session. May I have the honor of introducing our guest lecturer, Dr. Lakshika Liyanage, the Dean, Faculty of Management, Social Sciences and Humanities of General Sir John Kothalavala Defence University. Our esteemed guest holds a PhD from the University of Durham in UK, a Master of Arts in Social Work from the University of Durham, and a Bachelor of Arts degree specialized in psychology from the University of Peradeniya in Sri Lanka, and has undergone various trainings in Sri Lanka, the UK, and the USA. Dr. Lakshika Liyanage has over 15 years of experience in lecturing, research, and consulting in psychology. She has held various important positions at the National Institute of Social Development, multiple defense academies in Sri Lanka, the University of Caledonia, Sri Lanka Foundation, and the University of Durham in the UK, to name a few. Dr. Lakshika has contributed her vast academic knowledge to the field of psychology, social work, and mental health by conducting many important research projects. She has conducted research projects for GSIZ, SIR, NISD, Ministry of Social Welfare, Asia Foundation, and NIMH, and held posts as a scientific committee member in Malaysia, a conference session chair in India, and a reviewer of the British Journal of Social Work. She has been awarded the Professor Indira Parkhi 50 Women in Educational Leaders Award by the World Education Congress Mumbai, India in 2017, the Commonwealth Scholarship to the UK to do her Masters, and the Overseas Research Student Scholarship to do her PhD, to name a few. Madam, we are profoundly honored to have you with us here, and we warmly welcome you to deliver this lecture. Thank you.
Well, I hope you all can see my screen. And thank you very much for that detailed introduction. And of course, for giving me this opportunity to conduct this lecture. I think this is the third or fourth consecutive time I am conducting a lecture on the same topic. And while welcoming you all to this lecture, let me give you a brief introduction about what I'll be talking to you. It's like we have like almost 1 hour and a few more minutes for questions and answers to spend with you. So the content of my presentation will be like, now we talked a lot about gender, and of course we have to understand why this concept of gender is this important in today's world context. That is because it comes as one of the sustainable developmental goals, and we'll be focusing on that. And also, like, I know most of you are aware about what is gender, but I thought, like, because still, like, say, during my this 20 plus years of teaching experience, now I understand that most of the students now they have the understanding of, like, most of the students they have the understanding of what is sex and what is gender, but still there are few who are not much aware about this concept. So without knowing about the concept of gender, we won't be able to talk about this the gender and community development. And also, like, along with gender, we always talked about gender discrimination, gender equity, gender equality, So we will have a little understanding about what these different words refer to. And of course, gender-based violence, that is also one area which I wanted to focus on. And I will give you ample of examples on how this gender discrimination is happening throughout the world, focusing especially on the Asian context, and also about what we refer to as community development, because we are talking about gender and community development. So we must have an understanding about what is community development, and what is this gender perspective as well. And of course, like when we talked about gender and development, there are a number of challenges, specifically in this part of the world, in the Asian context. So we'll be looking at some of the challenges. And finally, of course, we can't just end everything with a negative thought, right? So we have to come out with something positive. We will look at the hope. What are the future perspectives for Asian women? So this will be what I will be overall covering in this lecture. And like once I finish my lecture, feel free to ask any questions. Sometimes you might have certain gray areas even after I finish the lecture. So feel free to ask me any questions. Okay, now this is the first thing. Now we talked about these sustainable developmental goals, right? I'm sure. Now earlier we talked about Millennium Developmental Goals, MDGs. Now we talked about SDGs. So uh, now, why we put this much emphasis on gender is mostly because now this is coming under goal number 5. Goal number 5 of Sustainable Developmental Goals set by the United Nations back in 2015. The goal number 5 refers to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Now, of course, like this statement or this developmental goal, this did not come just overnight. This came after collecting all the statistics from around the world, from all the empirical evidence, research, and with all the other evidence. The, the world had understood that there is a problem with gender. Right? Though we talked about gender equity and equality, though we talked a lot about giving equal and same opportunities to all genders, still around the world, this is not happening properly. Of course, the percentage of success stories is less than the percentage of failures. So therefore, after considering all these things, this achieving gender equality and empower all women and girls, this sustainable developmental goal has been introduced under the United Nations 2015 SDGs as number 5. So this is why we are also focusing, like with any course or program that we are studying, we are also focusing on this gender concept because of this. And for you students, I know you are from different faculties, but please do remember now, since this gender is a main concept in the world, there are many scholarships, research grants likewise are available to study further on these gender issues. So if you are interested in, you can search on web, you can go to these INGO websites, international non-governmental organization websites, and refer to them. There are plenty of opportunities for you to get scholarships, to do further research, and of course to start new projects for those who are interested in. And of course, we also have the Center for Gender Equity and Equality at KDU. I was the former director there. So now to inform you that we have a gender policy at KDU. Any form of gender discrimination is not allowed at KDU, right? If you go to the KDU main website, refer to academic and then go to the centers, you will come across the Center for Gender Equity and Equality, and you will come across the policy. You can read the policy. And if you have like any complaints to make on, you can direct them to the Center for Gender Equity and Equality, which is now headed by Dr. Nirosha Vedasinghe from the Faculty of Computing. Now we will get into our second topic, that is the concept of gender. Now children, now when we look at this picture, now of course this reminds me of, uh, well, before that, right? Now, now when you are born to this world, well, you being a girl or a boy, of course, biologically, we understand that there is a difference. But when we grow up in a society, what we understand is more than these sexual differences or the sexual orientations, there are many things that we associate with being a boy or a girl or a male or a female. So in this picture, at a glance, you will understand, well, everything related to men is in blue and everything related to women is in pink, right? Of course, as I said earlier, I remember when I was pregnant with my two children at both occasions after the scan, and when the doctor informed me that I'm going to have a baby boy, right? Both I have two boys, and like my husband, my in-laws, my sisters, my mother, my relatives, they all were like, stitching these clothes in blue and buying or like painting the walls in blue, and the cot in blue, the net in blue, and the pillowcases in blue, like everything in blue, right? So it's like the society has associated a number of things uh, to our, say, to our traditions, to our customs, right? Even to the values, to the ways of behavior, going beyond that particular sex that you are born with. That, of course, what we talk under gender. You can see the main difference between sex and gender here. Sex refers to the biological differences between males and females. Of course, simply it refers to who we are as males and females. And when we talked about gender, the social and cultural significance we attach to those presumed biological differences. And this refers to what we become as men and what we become as women, which occurs through the process of socialization, samajanukarana, the process of socialization. Right. Now, now, you being a girl or a boy from birth is, of course, like mostly different when we talked about the gender concept, right? We talked about male as being masculine and female as being feminine. So, what is considered to be female or male is mostly a creation of the society, right? It is not that the things, the bits that you are born with, it is a creation of the society. Right? Here's a list of things for you to understand the difference of the two things. Right? Sex refers to the biological and physiological differences between men and women. It has two main categories, either a male or a female. And sex remains the same regardless of time and culture. You are born as a boy or you are born as a girl, right? Until you die, unless you undergo a transgender surgery or something, you remain a boy or you remain a girl, male or a female. And sex is created by the reproduction needs. That is a biological thing. Right? We have a reproductive system. So sex is created by the reproduction needs. But if you take gender, it is of course created by the social and cultural norms, social and cultural differences between men and women. Gender, we talked about two main categories, but I will take you further into some other names and some other categorization related to that in the latter part of the, or in a few minutes' time. We talked about being masculine or being feminine. And when we take the roles related to gender, now these gender roles may differ across different across time and across different cultures. Now, for example, I remember my grandma telling me, she told me actually, like when they were young, that was in the early 90s, say around 1920s, 1930s, likewise, the concept was women should not study. The only thing that they should study is to, read a letter and write an answer. That is the only thing. So even in the convent, now she attended a convent, and like after like say grade 8, 9, they were forced to like from their homes, they were forced to stay at home because they know enough to read a letter and answer a letter, write a letter, right? But gradually when it comes to my mother's time, they were more encouraged to do their studies, right? At least to go up to their ordinary levels, right? But during that time, they had the opportunity to enter the university and then achieve their higher degrees likewise. And now, if you consider like my time and of course, like your generation, Z generation, you of course understand like our culture emphasize high on females getting educated, right? So across time, the gender expectations can be changed and across the cultures as well. Now in Sri Lanka, of course, our culture, there are certain, now of course, when it comes to education, we are very lucky, like as women, as girls, you have the equal opportunity as boys to go for any level of education. But this is not the same in some other cultures. If you consider certain countries, certain cultures like Afghanistan, like Pakistan, even in India, not that all the women get the equal opportunity of getting educated. So gender roles, expectations may differ across time and differ across the cultures. So we understand these gender distinctions are created by social norms. To the left side of this slide, you will be able to see three words. Sex, of course, you understand the biological traits that society associates with being male or female. And if you take gender, what we discussed right now, cultural meaning attached to being masculine and feminine, which influence the personal identities. And then when we talked about sexuality, that is the sexual attraction, practices and identity which may or may not align with sex and gender. So it's a different thing. I'm not going to explain you all these things because my focus is something else, but you must know now we use these terms, these words for different things. So sex, gender and sexuality are three different things. Right? And see now when we see topics. Now some of the research findings they reveal about these issues related to gender and how it is practiced in different cultures. Now I have taken a few examples for your understanding. Now, sex is considered as irrelevant to most areas of life in the Israeli kibbutzim, but yet traditional gender roles seem to be reasserting themselves there. And I have quoted some ideas from the writings of Margaret Mead, a very famous American cultural anthropologist. Now I have put in red here, like remember there are many critics that Margaret Mead had sometimes oversimplified the facts, but her findings reveal, now she was a cultural anthropologist and she used to spend a lot of time with the African tribes, right, in different parts of Africa. Now she spent years and years studying these societies, these cultures, these tribes. Right? And Margaret Mead, she mainly studied gender in three New Guinea societies. Now, among the tribe Arapesh, both sexes would be described by US citizens as feminine. Among the Munduguma, both sexes would be described by US citizens as masculine. But among the Shambuli, Gender roles reverse the US standards. What is being called as feminine or what is being called as masculine. So Mead concluded that these case studies prove that gender does vary across cultures. So as I said, there are many examples, case studies. Likewise, in order for us to understand how sex and gender can be named as two different things. Right. Well, I told you, like now we talked about two main genders, but you believe me, some of you might have gone through these things. There are now 64 terms that describe gender identity and gender expression, right? I went through this website here, um, and of course, it shows like these different, like 64 terms. So you can just think how many gender identities or expressions that you are aware of. Mainly, like now in the society, there are like the discussion on like five, six different genders, right? But mainly, most of us, I think more than 90% of us know only being a male or a female, right? Only that identity we are aware about. But there are very now, me being a counselor, for some time I have talked to many students, many people who have revealed me about their different gender identities. So I of course know like practically there are more than what we know, right? So there are 64 terms being used. So this is a very complicated thing. Right? Now, why I put all these pictures and things is for now this gender unicorn. You can refer later if you are interested in studying more about this. Now, we talked about gender identity, we talked about gender expression or how we present our gender, and sex, what we refer to as, what is assigned to us at our birth. And there is a difference between, who you are sexually attracted to you, and then who you are romantically or emotionally attracted to, right? So this is a very complicated, very how could I say, very big picture. Of course, you, as I said, if you are interested more, you can read more on these things. And I put these pictures for you to like think from your gender perspective or what your culture has associated with certain gender types. Now, a man wearing a pink flared skirt with a ring of flowers on the head, this is not something that is common for males in our own culture, right? And it is not that common for a man to dress in a red floral night dress, right? That is because our culture. But of course, there's nothing, as you know, that a man can't wear a skirt or a man can't wear a dress likewise. Right? So these are all related to how our society talked about or the society accepted norms and values related to gender and what role or what other expectations they have towards males and females. Well, I think I managed to give you a small introduction or a small briefing about the difference between sex and gender. And the other one I wanted to focus is all about the gender-based violence, GBV. Mhm. Mostly, uh, people are aware about uh, SGBV, that is sexually gender-based violence. That is very common. That is very common in the sense people talk about it. There are like, news on this SGBV, but of course, gender-based violence is something more deeper than that. GBV, we abbreviate it as GBV. This refers to violence that is directed at an individual based on his or her biological sex or gender identity. And the most important part, GBV includes physical, sexual, verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse, threats, coercion, and economic or educational deprivation, whether occurring in public or private life. So we commonly know about this physical violence, physical gender-based violence. We know about sexual gender-based violence. We know about verbal gender-based violence. But emotional gender-based violence, which is something we do not talk much about, and psychological gender-based violence, which we do not talk much about, but can have or can lead to lifelong sufferings, lifelong issues with a person's life, right? It can be a threat, right? And of course, the other side that we do not think about is the economic deprivation or educational deprivation, right? That is also a part of gender-based violence. Now, I told you, like what my grandma had experienced, that is educational deprivation, and that is gender-based violence. If you take economic deprivation, that is where, like say, sometimes now in certain cases, even in Sri Lanka, even like females after getting that much educated, sometimes they are forced to stay at home, and like once they get married, they are asked to quit their jobs, stay at home, do the household chores, look after children, likewise. And they then have no income for themselves. They have to depend on their husbands for everything, which is actually the economic deprivation. Right? So just imagine, like, if you, like, say, now I'm addressing the girls in the class. If you want to go to a salon, or if you want to buy a new dress, right? And when you ask your husband, or if you ask your partner, and if he, say like, no, now you went to the salon last month also, and you bought a dress last month as well, right? You have no other option because you are economically deprived. Education deprivation, economic deprivation, all can be considered as gender-based violence. So in the Asian context, now we are talking about the community development, the gender perspective in in Asia, right? So these things are very prominent in the Asian context. Women are more dependent, right? They have become dependent not because of their fault, but the society based on the gender concept has forced them to stay at home, right? So there's a lot of deprivation. And these ideas are actually like, I read a lot about these things from this Women for Women organization website. As I said, if you prefer to read more, study more about them, you can go to these websites. Let me quickly show you a small video clip on this gender-based violence.
One in 3 women experience violence at the hands of their husband or partner. That's over 800 million women worldwide. These women can feel trapped, afraid. Their lives are often restricted. Those who consider leaving often fear ending up penniless or losing their children. Over time, their confidence slips away, making a life without violence seem a distant memory. The abuse can lead to injuries, as well as serious physical and mental health problems, in some cases, even death. Many women contract sexually transmitted infections or have unwanted pregnancies, and when pregnant, have a greater risk of miscarriage or of having a premature or low birth weight baby. They can experience depression, anxiety, other mental health problems, or become addicted to drugs and alcohol. It can be hard to know who to trust or where to turn. But there is a place they can go. A visit to a local clinic is often one of the few opportunities women have to go out alone. And it's important for doctors and nurses to make sure this isn't a missed opportunity. When doctors, nurses, and midwives listened with compassion, survivors are more likely to share their story. When they ask the right questions, they can uncover what is really happening and challenge cultural attitudes that say it's okay for a husband to hit his wife. They can reassure women that it's not their fault and can work with women to help them stay safe. And where necessary, connect them with other services that can provide, for example, shelter, psychological support, legal services, and financial opportunities. More women can find their way to a life without violence when changes are implemented across healthcare and other systems. Changes such as private rooms for consultations, training that enables doctors and nurses to respond better to women's needs, and raising awareness of the harmful consequences of violence for women and children and how to prevent it. Making these changes helps foster a culture where violence is unacceptable and where women have the courage to speak out. Imagine if that could happen to each and every one of those 800 million women.
Okay, so now gender-based violence is, of course, um, uh, cannot be accepted now. Of course, in most of the articles, in most of the videos, you will find that this gender-based violence is mostly focused on women, right? And that is the number of cases which are reported about women. But it does not say that it is only the women or children that face these type of violences. It can be men as well, right? Otherwise, now all my these male students in the class will think I am just I talk towards only females. No. Now, when we talked about gender, it's all of you. And when we talked about gender-based violence, it's about all of you. But right, as I said, like the statistics, data, and like most of the cases that have been reported are mostly based on females. So unfortunately, what I managed to find like through my reading is mostly like focusing on females, right? But it does not mean that it is only about women, right? So say now when we talked about gender-based violence, uh, it occurs everywhere around the world, right? Among whether it's a developed country or a developing country, whether it's a very rich economy, whether it's in the upper class of the society, or it is whether it is among the poor people. No, gender-based violence occurs everywhere around the world without any difference. So while both boys and girls are negatively impacted, this is the point that I wanted to highlight. Girls are particularly at risk. An estimated 1 in 3 women globally have experienced physical or sexual violence in their lifetime, mostly at the hands of their partners, not from outsiders, mostly at the hands of their partners. So types of violence may include prenatal sex selection, female infanticide, neglect, female genital mutilation. I don't know whether children you have heard about this. This female genital mutilation is a practice in some of the African tribes, right? Rape, child marriage, forced prostitution. Now I have worked with many commercial sex workers, right? And if when I listen to their stories, more than 90% of them being forced to prostitution, to be a commercial sex worker. Not that they have willingly accepted to do this. They've been forced. somehow they've been forced, sometimes without their knowing that they are starting a job like this. It's very unfortunate, right? So these types of violence may also include honor killing. Some of you might have heard about honor killing and dowry killing. Now, these are things related to, say, in certain cultures, certain religions. If there are children, like especially daughters, if they select partners from a different caste or a religion, which they consider as not matching to their particular status, sometimes they go for honor killing. They kill their own children. There are many incidents like that. Only a few cases been reported, but many cases hidden. And dowry killing, that is when the expected or the promised dowry is not given. And so these are very unfortunate, and these are different types of gender-based violence. So many of these gross violations of human rights have been used as weapons of war around the world. Right? And we understand these refugee children are particularly vulnerable. Right? Not just the refugee children, but even refugee women. Children, now you will not know about these things, but I remember soon after the end of the war, 30-year war in Sri Lanka, I was engaged in the Jaffna, Kilinochchi, Mulathu, and Vaunia areas, training the police officers in the community police who have to work with these vulnerable communities. Why I call them as vulnerable is like even like soon after the war, there were many widows, right? Many orphans, right? So many women are vulnerable and the children are vulnerable. So they were in hands of like risk almost all the time, right? Of course, I know the situation like very positively developed later, but I'm like just talking about like soon after the war situation. I know still there are certain cases, but like 50% better than it was in 2010, like sorry 2000. I worked with them in 2000, end of 2011, 2012. So during that time it was terrible, right? And sometimes like somehow with the support of a interpreter, I talked to some of these women and I asked them, now why don't you report these cases? And they said like one thing is the language problem, and on the other hand they don't trust on anyone, right? So yeah, I'm not going to read out this whole list, but this is for your understanding. When we take different forms of GBV, gender-based violence, I talked to you about physical violence, sexual, psychological, economic, educational, and then emotional likewise. So there are like different forms. As you can see, physical GBV can be, say, beating, kicking, burning. Sexual can be forced marriage, rape, forced prostitution. Psychological GBV can be neglect, right? Controlling a partner, disrespect, shame, likewise. They are all now as in one of the slides explained. Some, no, sorry, I think in the video clip it was said that sometimes like um females, they they come into the idea that these are normal things in a family life, right? Neglect, like say forced for sexual relationships, and sometimes even say beating and things, right? And I have talked to these females, and sometimes what they said is like in Sinhala they said සමහර වෙලාවට එහෙම වුණාට අනික හැම වෙලාවෙම එයා හුඟක් හොඳයි මට කන්න බොන්න දෙනවා දරුවෝ බලනවා. But they said it's like sometimes they are very violent and they do these things to us, but in sometimes they are very good to me, good to our children. So they have like sort of gone into the idea like these beating and harassing them, neglecting them, this economic deprivation, those things are like, say, common in family life. So, like, those things are like normal, right? But actually, those things are not normal. Those are GBV, gender-based violence, right? Okay. And then, like, when we talked about community development, the gender perspective, a main issue is related to gender inequality, right? Now, we highly talked about gender equity, we talked about gender equality, but why we see that, or what we see as affecting the community development is gender inequality. So, gender inequality is the notion and circumstance where women and men are not considered equally. Gender inequality refers to unequal treatment or perceptions, Sanjanani. Unequal treatment or perceptions of individuals entirely or partially due to their gender. Right? Let me repeat that. Gender inequality refers to unequal treatment or perceptions of individuals entirely or partially due to their gender. Here are some statistics for you. Now, how this gender discrimination is happening throughout the world. Some of the facts are, of course, focusing on the Asian context, but these are like generally now look at some of the things are like why I use the word amusing statistics because of course, some of them are very new to us. Like I was even taken by surprise when I read some of these statistics. Women are 47% more likely to suffer severe injuries in car crashes because safety features are designed for men. So that is, we understand, like say, even there is discrimination a woman being a driver. Of course, we like in the roads, we experience that discrimination enough as lady drivers, right? But now you see to learn that this 47% of now this or the safety features are designed for men. That was something new to me when I like read on this. And look at the second one. 33,000 girls become child brides every day. It will take 108 years to close the gender gap. This is what the website says, but I don't think gender gap will be something like that even in hundreds of years to come. It won't be that easy to close the gender gap, but what we are trying to do is just to minimize the sequences. Only 6 countries in the world has given women equal legal work rights as men. And when it comes to AI professionals, only 22% women, but it said it could be down to lack of confidence with women. That's something else. Women in rural parts of Africa spend 40 billion hours a year collecting water. And those are uncalculated human labor. They're not being calculated. For every female film character, there are 2.24 men. Now, don't ask me how this 0.24 men, right? That is just as a percentage, right? So, gender discrimination leads to less contribution of females in the development process. This is what we are focusing on. So, gender discrimination starting in childhood continues to rob children of their childhoods and limit their chances, disproportionately affecting the world's girls. This is something very serious. Now, I have quoted these things from the Save the Children website. Save the Children, you might have heard about. A girl is far more likely to be denied her rights, kept from school, forced to marry, and subjected to violence, her voice undervalued if it's heard at all. And this assault on childhood also deprives nations of the energy and talent they need to progress. Right? This assault on childhood, gender discrimination, also deprives nations of the energy and talent they need to progress. So now, if we focused on Asia and South Asia, the UNICEF has identified gender equality as the most important investment that can be made. In all South Asian countries, patriarchal values and social norms keep gender inequalities alive. It is still there. Discriminatory practices begin even before birth and affect every aspect of a child's future. Now, why before birth? Now, in certain parts of India and in some other countries of South Asia, when they come to know that the woman is carrying a girl, right? The pregnancy is a girl, they are forced to abort the child, right? So that is why discriminatory practices begin even before birth, and even after birth, it affects every aspect of a child's future. Now, these ideas are from UNICEF South Asia. Let me show you this very interesting video clip on this very quickly. Okay, let me quickly. I thought of like without giving a break, we will finish the lecture at a stretch and then go for questions and answers, right? So I'm not going to read you all these statistics, but I wanted to show you that now what matters in community development is one thing, as you all understood now, it is educating all the children, whether like without any gender difference. So there is a lot of inequality in education. Of course, we are very lucky in Sri Lanka because we have the equal opportunity. All the girls and boys have the same opportunity for higher education. And in fact, the recent statistics show that when it comes to university entrance, I think like more than 60%, it's girls. 62% or 60%, it's girls. and less boys. That shows equal opportunities are there. So now all these statistics show that equal education must be given to both like girls and boys, to all the genders, in order to go for community development. Right? You can see all the statistics here, how severe these statistics are. Right? Here is one case study which I will quickly read to you. I was 14 years old. That time I was in secondary school. I have two brothers and we all went to school. At the time, I was about to be married, but I did not know anything. At last, I asked my parents. They did not tell me. Finally, I told my parents that I am not ready to be married. I want to continue my study. They assured me that after marriage, I can continue my study. Nonetheless, that was not true. They cheated me. After 12 days of my marriage, I wanted to go back to school, but my in laws refused. They had promised that I would go to school after marriage. They broke their promise. I could not continue my study. On the other hand, my two brothers are now well educated. So, this is just one case study, and there are thousands of stories like this. And when we look at the gender gap in literacy rates in most of the South Asian countries, we can see a huge difference. As I said, like Sri Lanka and Maldives are in a good position, but like all the other countries, they have severe issues with these literacy rates among between the two genders. South Asia has the largest gender gap, 17 percentage. Right? You can see from this slide. So some more statistics, I'm not going to read them all again, but just look at the first one. There are currently 152 million children engaged in child labor around the world. Right? It's both girls and boys. Right? And even still in Sri Lanka, we have this practice of finding servants, underage children, from these, like tea estates, from that sector, to do our household chores, right? And most, like I have seen, like in many cases, most of them are under the age of 18. And the other thing is like now this child labor thing, girls, as I said, are more likely to shoulder the household chores responsibilities. So they are not given equal opportunities for education. They are forced to stay at home and look after their younger siblings and doing the or supporting the household chores. Child marriage is the other problem. Like from the statistics we already saw or we already came across, we can see child marriage is still very prominent in the South Asian context. But actually in Sri Lanka, once again, we are more advanced, or we are very lucky that the numbers are very low. But in many other South Asian countries, child marriage is a huge problem. Right? And the issue has been doubled with some of the things related to COVID-19 pandemic. And these are some statistics to show you gender discrimination even in keeping an account. Right? මුදල් ගිණුමක් පියා ගැනීම සම්බන්ධයෙන්. Gender inequality in account ownership. Right? Now you look at all these information. Worldwide, most unbanked adults are women. Now, these are by the Global Findex, this World Bank, this report. Gender gap globally 7 percentage points. Gender gap in developing economies 9 percentage. Gender gap in Pakistan, Turkey and Bangladesh nearly 30 percentage points. Gender gap in Cambodia, Myanmar, Azerbaijan and Kyrgyz Republic not appreciable at all. But gender gap in Sri Lanka and Vietnam not significant. Gender gap in Indonesia and Philippines, it's negative. Women are more likely than men to have an account. Access to mobile phones, once again, the gender gap can be seen. Access to mobile phones and the internet, once again, there is a gender gap. Gender gap in labor force. You look at all these statistics, look at all these records. And female labor force participation in Asia and in the Pacific. You can see Sri Lanka here in the middle. If you compare it with the world average, right? And workplace gap. Right. So the phenomenon of missing women, sorry, excuse me, gender-related disparities in health status have led to an imbalanced sex ratio for the past 100 years, right? Which is still worsening. An estimated 60 million to 1 billion girls are missing worldwide, with South Asia's imbalanced sex ratios contributing to a large portion of this number. In some parts of the Indian subcontinent, the sex ratio has fallen as low as 770 women per 1,000 men. So gender discrimination at each stage of the female life, the ideology of son preference and the lower value of female children contribute to this imbalance. I told this before. Now, sex-selective abortions, the neglect of girl children, reproductive mortality, and poor access to health care for girls and women have all been cited by many qualitative studies as reasons for the difference. Right? So we have to admit, yes, there is an imbalanced sex ratio. The women picture, the picture of women is mostly missing in the community development aspect in the South Asian context. So the effects of gender equality on society, investing in gender equality can have large scale benefits, right? So every $1 invested in women's and children's health can generate a $20 return. A girl's eventual income will increase by up to 20% for every year she stays in school. Advancing women's equality could add up to $28 trillion to global annual growth by 2025. So the amount is significant. So if gender equality is there in the society, of course, we could think about more prosperity, more development in the communities. Okay. So now when we talked about community development, with the time limitation, I'm not going to show you the video clip on community development. But when to refer a community as a developed community, then gender equality is a significant part. On the other hand, for community development, gender equality is, of course, extremely important. Right? Two things. If we refer to a community as a developed community, then it has gender equality. And on the other hand, to develop a community, we have to have gender equality. Okay? So the women's role in community development, especially in the Asian context, in the third world countries, women have been subjected to cultural inferiority, educational backwardness, economic deprivation, as well as religious discrimination. And like now, if you take Sri Lanka, women are not allowed to get into the Patiripur or to go to the top, go to the what we call as the Udamaluwa in the Anuradhapura Sri Mahabodhi as Buddhists. And in other religions, women are sometimes not allowed to enter to their, like, say, enter to the mosque, likewise, right? I think I am correct in saying these things. And in reaction to this state of affairs, women from this part of the world have engaged in actions geared towards contributing towards the development of their immediate communities and their countries generally. So there is a challenge. In South Asia, a preference for sons means that the girl child must struggle twice as hard to survive and fulfill her potential. Right? Not in all the countries, but in most of the cases. So, what is the way forward for us? Right? Now, I quoted from Eleanor Roosevelt: when you cease to make a contribution, you begin to die, right? But now, here's the positive point for me to wind up this lecture. Now, there are steps that we can take in order to empower women to to go towards the process of community development. So, freedom of acquiring knowledge from every source, from formal education to professional know how and proficiency, and wisdom gained from books and other literature, knowledge of divine guidance, and the learning about the world around, and the opportunities to develop their skills in sports, leadership, communication, and management, etc. The independence to choose her career and follow her dreams, the liberty to earn and spend her own money, equal participation in decision making at all levels, starting from family to society. So their voices must be heard, must be listened by others. Now, see, like if you take the decision making, highest decision making body of Sri Lanka, look at the less percentage of female participation. Of course, you might say the small percentage is also making a lot of chaos, like by going through all those video clips and things of some ministers. But the decision making has to be equal. It has to come from the women's voice, must be listened to as well, right? So, ensuring a safe and protective environment for women to contribute to the building of community, providing assurance and support. Empowering women is empowering the society. So women are the bridges of cultural heritage. They are the key participants of community building and change makers. I hope the my male students in class will not get upset when I talked about all these things. But these, of course, all these facts are coming from empirical evidence, right? So it is not to say that women are more important than men. Both are equally important, right? Only thing is to go for like further development. This equality must be maintained. The same opportunities, same recognition for both males and females. Right. Okay. So way forward, looking ahead, achieving gender parity in literacy is critical for women to effectively compete in the labor market and in turn help lift communities out of poverty, and undertake reforms to give women equal rights to economic resources as well as access to ownership and control over land and other forms of property, financial services, inheritance, and natural resources in accordance with national laws. They have to be equal for both males and females. And it is imperative to integrate a gender perspective across all UNICEF programs to promote the value and empowerment of women and children in South Asia. Now, UNICEF is doing, of course, doing a lot of work in doing this. You can refer to UNICEF website for more information on these things. So, education and training for women, looking at women and health, violence against women, women and economy, women in power and decision making, institutional mechanisms for the advancement of women, human rights of women, and women in the media, women and the media. how women is presented in media, right? Women and the environment, and of course, more focus on the girl child because they are the future. So here's a summary to wind up. Summary of steps to empower women. Freedom of acquiring knowledge from every source, from formal education to professional know-how and proficiency. Okay? So now all these things I discussed with you earlier. So this is just a summary of them, right? So to giving them opportunities to develop their skills in other extracurricular things, financial safety, financial independence, educational liberty, right? To listen to the voices of females, right? All these things are really important in empowering women, which will undoubtedly lead to a well-developed community. So social change is only possible in an environment where the individuality and the uniqueness of the women and men are recognized. So this is the hope. It must be respected and it must be valued. We shall never forget the fact that women are half or more of the population of any community. Right. So that is it from my side. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. If you have any questions or any comments, I'm free to. I'm here to answer. Thank you very much. I hope what I presented is clear to you. But if any comments or any clarifications needed, please feel free.
Okay, then if you have any question, you can send it to our common email. Then I will forward it to Lakshika Madam and get back to you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to extend my gratitude through this vote of thanks on behalf of the students participating in the short course on cultural linkages towards an Asian ideology for the academic year 2023-24. First and foremost, I would like to express our heartfelt appreciation to our esteemed lecturer, Dr. Lakshika Liyanage, the Dean of the Faculty of Management, Social Sciences and Humanities, for generously sharing her time and invaluable knowledge with us today. Madam, your contribution to this course is a true blessing and we are profoundly grateful. I would also like to extend our thanks to Dr. Hemanta Premaratna and the team of the staff at the Department of Social Sciences of KDU who work together to bring these enlightening lectures together. Last but certainly not least, I extend our appreciation to all the participants from our university who joined us for this event. Your active engagement has not only made this lecture a resounding success, but has also provided you with valuable insights into the topic of gender perspective in community development in Asia, the role of Asian women. In conclusion, I wish to express our deep gratitude to Dr. Lakshika Liyanage for her unwavering commitment, as this marks her fourth consecutive year contributing to our cause. Madam, it is a distinct honor to have you amongst us, and we deeply appreciate that time and effort you have invested in enriching our educational experience.